Well, welcome to today's episode. Today we have a very exciting guest, Casey Fox. Casey is the co-founder and CTO of Techletics. With over 15 years of experience leading enterprise-scale data platforms, cybersecurity initiatives, and engineering teams, Casey has built technology strategies for both Fortune 500 companies as well as startups. At Techletics, he's driving advancements in AI systems in communication, vision, and audio, combining deep technical expertise with executive leadership to deliver secure, high-performance solutions. Now, for those of you just joining the podcast, we at Strativa AI help businesses scale their revenue over 12 months using AI. So if you want to learn how to take your business to the next level, make sure to stick around for future episodes. And if you're interested in a free growth consultation, just drop the word growth into the DMs. Now, Casey, can we hear a bit about yourself and what your role is at your company and how you got it all started?
Yeah, no, hey, I appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me on and having a discussion on some of this fun stuff we've got going. Oh,
Indeed.
I mean, hey, you can see in the background, right? I like building stuff. I've kind of always been like that. I got, like you said in my background, I've been in IT for about 20 years. I've been in a lot of leadership roles, a lot of different industries and tech stacks and areas of focus the past 15 years or so. About 10 years or so ago, I had my partner at Techletics, right? He called me up. I was in Denver at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was sitting down and he was having lunch with his old football coach. He played football at Arizona State. And his old football coach was Frank Cush, right? So it's Frank Cush Field is what's out there at ASU.
Nice.
And they were having lunch and Frank knew that Dan got into technology after school. And basically said, hey, when are you going to figure out a way to give our football players careers in tech if they're not going to go? What's the option for that? And Dan had worked with a couple of people in the government sector, in the public sector out in Arizona and had some ideas for it. And he called me up. And I was, like I said, I was in Denver working in the healthcare space at the time. And he called me up and said, hey, I need you to come down here to Phoenix and figure out how to turn football players to coders, right? So that's how, like I said, as me, as somebody, you look in the background, like I'm tinkering with things and trying to figure out how to build out new use cases and figure out new innovative ways to do stuff. That was a no-brainer for me, right? So we started off as R&D for many, many years, right? Taking on kind of one small component, one little piece of the project at a time, of building out this model that we could turn basically non-tech people into highly functional developers in a short period of time. We probably spent 7 to 8 years of the past decade figuring out those pieces, just kind of taking on one project at a time and figuring out where the moving parts were and what levers we'd need to pull to make it successful and how it worked in different industries and different tech stacks and roles and everything else. But now we've got to the point now where, we're scaling it out, right? We're building out. We've been fortunate. We've doubled in the past 3 years or so revenue, and we're keeping it going. And I get the really fun part is I always say I'm like duct tape. You know what I mean? Like I kind of jump around and I help out, architecture wise. I'll jump in and get my hands dirty doing dev, but I will, I'll interview every single person we have coming across. I'll help scope out projects that we have across all different industries. But I'm kind of jumping in and making sure that, we don't have any gaps anywhere across the board. It's a really fun role for me. In a nutshell, that's me. And that's my place here.
Fantastic. And so you mentioned across different industries. And so what are some industry examples that you guys are into?
Yeah. I mean, we've got several in the e-commerce space. We do a ton in transportation. The transportation, third-party logistics, supply chain logistics, right? We do tons of stuff in that space. Manufacturing, we do work across, app dev, data and analytics, AI, infrastructure, cloud migrations, but manufacturing, education, finance, healthcare, we're all over the place.
Interesting. And so what is it that you're concentrated on, even though it's across all those industries? Like, what do you guys do?
Essentially we're a full service consulting company, right? The play that we wanted to try to make was, you know, earlier in my career, right, I worked for a big healthcare company, and I was a developer advisor, right? And at any point in time, I'd have 5 to 10 different projects going, and I would be kind of the internal counterpart, and we'd outsource all the work for it. And like I said, say I'd have 5 projects going, on each one of those projects, there'd be 5 or 10 different people, and then I'd be, kind of the subject matter expert on the data space. It was specifically in the data side. And, I'd make sure that we had all our documentation in place, the code was following best practices, we would have all our gating approval for migration to the different environments. We'd have our implementation plans and regression testing, rollback strategies, everything that we would need if anything went haywire once it got into production. So I did all that stuff. Most of the time, the teams that we worked with were offshore, right?
Mm,
And meanwhile, I'd always talk to people that would want to get into tech careers, and it was so few and far between, right?
yeah, I
It's
was
not like
thinking
there were,
so, probably. At least back
yeah,
then.
it was, especially like I worked in there was an ETL tool. It sounds weird to say this now, right? Informatica, right? Like
Oh,
anybody that's in the ETL space, right? If you've been doing it in any clip for a certain period of time, you've heard of Informatica, and Informatica
yep,
used to be the de facto, right? Like
right.
if you were serious, like you were working in Informatica. Well, an enterprise license of Informatica was like 250 or whatever it would be, right? And it was very, very difficult to get that kind of experience. And it's not like somebody would hire an army of people to come in there and work on that. You'd have to get
Right.
lucky and get one of those spots. But meanwhile, I'd be doing these projects, and we might have, like I said, I may have 5 projects with 10 developers on each one of them, and the vast majority of them were kind of getting up to speed as they were going along with it. And I always looked at that and I thought, boy, why there's all kinds of people down my street, right? Or in my neighborhood that would be great in one of these roles if we just had a mechanism to get them into it and provide support
Mm,
to help make them successful into it. And that was honestly that was one of our big motivations for why we built it this way. But I say that because that's what we do. That's kind of our bread and butter. We have everything from 25-year subject matter experts and C sharp, right,
uh-huh.
to developers with 2 years of experience. We're all over the place with it. But essentially, our process that we've built is we tried to make this technology agnostic process where we could take non-traditional IT resources, people without, 4-year degree. Sometimes we get
Yeah,
4-year degree people. Sometimes we have people come in with a master's degree, but they're all over the place. And our whole thing was, well, we don't want to limit ourselves to just that. We want to find the people that are kind of untapped resources that are sitting out there that have a really strong work ethic and they have an interest in technology. They just didn't have the opportunity to get into an IT career, and we want to find those people and insulate them in teams and start turning them into high quality IT resources here
yeah,
domestic in the US. And when you do it that way, you kind of end up flipping the price point on its model where you get this really strong, motivated individual, a team of these people, and you get a much lower dollar point. So, usually when we build our projects out, we can compete price wise with offshore with domestic talent. So
nice.
that was that was our whole point in doing it. I say data is our sweet spot. We do tons of stuff in the ETL, data migration, cloud migrations, business intelligence, analytics, reporting. We do tons of stuff in that space. But this is where I say it's technology agnostic, where we'll do it for cyber analysts, right? We'll do it for infrastructure admins. We'll do it for DevSecOps developers. Whatever it is, we're able to kind of apply the process to meet the customer in the role where it needs to be, right?
Interesting.
That's essentially what we've tried to build.
And so how do you ramp up and down, scale up and down your workforce so that you're able to deliver across so many different sectors?
Yeah. Well, we've got a really, really strong um, contingent of senior engineers, right? That's one of our things that we really rely on. We've also got a really good partner network of senior engineers that we can bring in. It
I
used to be, here's the other thing, right? Is when you're we have to interview a ton of people, right? Anytime we put a rec out. Earlier this year we had a project that we ramped up, and I think we brought in 4 engineers, and we got something like 2,000 applicants, right?
Wow.
And hey, we eat our own dog food. We've got some internal AI processes that we have in place to help us, identify potential people on the front end, and then it kind of takes some of the burden off of doing the phone screens. But we talk to everybody essentially. We try to find, like I said, again, we find those people that they may not be what you're looking for on paper because they just haven't had the opportunity, but hey, let's get the right people that are motivated, and then we put them through an expedited training course with ASU. We're funded through the Department of Labor to do that,
Hmm.
so we get funding coming in to do that. We put them through that course, and then right on the other end, as soon as you get through it, we pair them up with these really strong 10, 15, 20-year senior subject matter experts to kind of, I would say, as a junior engineer, the biggest difference between a junior engineer and a senior engineer is being able to pivot, right? Like, you
The
think
younger
about,
go faster. Is that what you're
yeah,
implying, or?
well, not just go faster, right? Because, like, you think about it this way, in anything you're building, right? In any application you're building, and this is probably really, it's probably not even IT specific. It's probably not even developer specific.
Okay.
But anything that you're building, right? It's always harder to build it the first time than it is the second, third, fourth, fifth,
Sure.
right? Okay.
Yeah.
So think of it like building a wall in the house, right? Okay. So if you're coming in and you're trying to build a wall in the house, well, the first wall that you're going to build is going to be trickier, right? But once you've had somebody walk you through how to build this wall, when it gets to that second wall, maybe you can't do it by yourself, but maybe you don't need quite as much help to build that
Hmm.
second wall. And then the third one, you don't need quite as much help. And every board that you're putting up on the house, you have to hammer it in. Well, you don't need a senior a 30-year carpenter to know how to hammer a nail into a board, but you still need them to help you place it, right? So you need that horsepower. You need somebody that's going to come in and do it. And that's kind of the thought process and the onboarding with this is, we need that senior subject matter expert to get
Hmm.
these people up to speed, but so much of IT development is just being motivated, following instructions, and then being open to learning and getting up to speed. So we tried to kind of make that more pronounced in these projects. So doing it that way, it helps us onboard so much faster. Is my kind of bringing it all back around on that
Hmm. Hmm.
is, I know it's really hard to find a team of senior subject matter experts, but if I can find some really good ones that have some mentor capability too, and then I
Yeah.
can pair that up with motivated people that are interested in tech, right? Then I can get those people up to speed really quickly. They can start following blueprints. And the big difference of being able to pivot, to be, okay, hey, going to a new wall now, right?
Right. Right.
That's the hard thing, like, for that junior to do. But if you've got that senior that can help them pivot, right, and then keep moving forward and keep gaining momentum and getting faster as they're moving, then it works. But that's always the biggest difference is just that knowledge gap of junior developers. But if you can arm your motivated, high performing, up and coming developers with that knowledge level of those senior mentors, it really expedites and drops the cost of the project.
Hmm. And so you mentioned that you've had some assistance by the local university, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay. And so how much of your workforce is local and also is, national or even international? I don't know if you could speak to that, right? Where it's like you've got these people that are coming in, we'll call them the newbies, that are being paired with your senior developers and engineers that know everything about putting up the first wall and
yeah,
200 after it, right? And so they're
yeah.
they're sharing their knowledge. How much of that is done in person, like brushing elbows, versus just online? And then also, if you could speak to how AI may be assisting that relationship between the two, no matter where the locations of them are.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll skip around on this one, sure. But
Okay.
number one, all domestic. We're all here in the US.
Okay. All
All
domestic.
is domestic.
Yeah.
Pre-COVID, right? We were all in an office in Phoenix, right? So
Okay.
actually Scottsdale is where our office was. And, I can remember, I came up through the ranks, right? And I worked in an office when I was a junior developer, and then several years later, I got the option where I could work remotely, and I kind of bounced around the country and did that for a while. But
Hmm.
I can remember that transition being really difficult, right? Because I didn't really have anybody there's no guidance on making that transition from sitting and being a kid, I say
Right.
kid, but in a 24, 5, something like that, right? And then,
Sure. Young.
yeah, waking up and just, cranking out work all day, right? And then, there's you just kinda have to feel some of that pain.
Yeah.
And I can remember COVID coming around, and I was talking my partner's name's Dan Jones, right? And then I called him up because 'cause I'd gotten an email. We had an office kinda on campus at ASU, and they were gonna shut everything down, right? And, I called him up and I said, "Hey, listen, I'm heading to the office. We gotta have a very real conversation. They're not gonna let people come back into this office tomorrow, right?" And I went in and I kinda gave it from my perspective. I was like, "Listen, hey, I did this for several years, and then I went to work remote, and it was super painful, and projects probably suffered as a result of it, right?" And I was like, "That's gonna happen with you guys tomorrow, and nothing can suffer. There can be no drop off in work. There can be no, you don't wake up any different. You're coming in, you're jumping online with your collared shirt on and everything else just like you are today, or else there's not going to be a day after that, right? That's the way this is going to be. And we have such a good group of developers that really embraced it
Mm.
and kept those projects rolling. Like there was no difference in being in that office versus outside of that office. And it's kind of a culture that we've tried to keep going since then to make it the
Okay.
same.
So you adapted well in the moment and you've kept that going.
We've kept it going. And
Okay.
what's beautiful about that is, and now we'll have customers come in and they'll say, hey, yeah, listen, we would love to have the team here locally, wherever we're at. We'll do that, right? I mean, we'll tell the customer, we'll build the team out exactly where you are, whatever town in America that you want to build a team out. We'll park a team of developers right there. But if you don't want to do that, then we're going to build a great team. We can build it in the same time zone, or we can build it within the one time zone, or whatever you want to do. We'll build it out that way. And having that as an option, right? Really lets you scale quickly. And if a customer comes back in and says, "Hey, sign the SOW," and I say, "Okay, well, when do you want to get started?" And they're like, "Hey, last Saturday," right? That's when I want to get started.
Right.
Well, then I've got those levers that I can flip and say, "Okay, well, hey, we'll expand it within a time zone, and I'm going to have you a team of 6 people ready to rock and roll here in 2 weeks," right? And then we
Mm.
do that all the time, where we'll spin up projects extremely quickly, just because we've got a process built to bring people in that are able to kind of be flexible and get up and moving quickly. The kind of people that really makes it successful with it.
Sounds it. Fantastic. And so, as you have mentioned a couple times about your using the AI in your business,
Oh,
how, what are some like ideal use cases that you can speak about that you either use internally, right, for your team, or
yeah,
that you may be putting into place for your clients?
yeah, all over the spot. That was part of that last question on that one, but so AI, what an interesting time to be probably in any role, right? Now I'm in tech, so I know it from a tech perspective, but I would assume every job out there has some kind of component or pressure related to AI or opportunity from AI.
It certainly could.
But yeah, I can't imagine that there's any that doesn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, I definitely view it as a tool in the tool belt, right? You run into some organizations and they're like, AI, I just don't know if I can trust it yet. Or, you hear some people say it's a fad, right? And it's going to die off. And you don't hear that one as much anymore.
Mm.
That one I used to hear a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I used to hear that a lot. You still have, I would say, a degree of hesitancy by some people.
Uh-huh.
And I think that they've started to, at least as they say, dip their toe in the water a bit. It's just a matter
Yeah.
of how quickly are people adapting to it, utilizing it, and really, I believe, using its full potential.
Yeah. It's a tool in the tool belt. I mean,
Yeah.
100%. It's a tool in the tool
Yeah.
belt. And you'll see people come in and they'll say, "Ah, yeah, but sometimes it makes mistakes." Well, okay. So let's back it up 5 years ago, right? When nobody was sitting there just cranking out question after question on ChatGPT. Let's back it up 5 years. You don't even have to go that far back. But let's back it up 5 years and say, okay, your junior developer or your senior developer, right, is working on some new thing and they don't exactly know how to do it right. What did they do then? Well, they didn't, I mean, in some cases they might, but they probably weren't going through the Java manual, right, on how to do
Right.
it. They were probably going out on Google and figuring out something. And guess what? Sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes they'd
Yeah.
make a mistake. Sometimes they'd click on a link that didn't have the right answer.
Hmm.
How is that any different than ChatGPT? Except
Yeah.
ChatGPT is more efficient, gets you to it faster, right?
Yeah, well, and at that level of things, right? I think that there's a certain level of adopters that are using it as a Google on steroids.
Sure.
And then there's the layers deeper at really, takes prompt engineering and agentic stuff to a whole different level that's where I think a lot of people are like kind of too overwhelmed by it in some
Yeah.
cases. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all over the spot with that, but for sure, that's where one case, like I said, my developers, I want them to use LLMs, right? I want them to use Gen AI to help supplement, knowledge transfer and getting up to speed and everything else. I always caution my people not to become over reliant, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're figuring something else out, right, you don't want just ChatGPT to figure out how to do it and then just give you the answer. Like you should be learning from what ChatGPT is spitting back into it. And like that's one of the great
Hmm.
things with kind of how it is now. It really explains its answer. So if you're going to be using it, learn, right? Because I'm going to
Yeah.
ask questions.
Yeah.
Other people are going to be asking questions.
And so, what are you doing to make sure that that human interaction with it is maintained by your team?
Well, I think that's on more senior leadership
Uh
to
huh.
enforce that. It's kind of like being in school, right? You've got your professors. That's how I think of it. Like I think of our senior engineers as professors, essentially, right? They're doing senior engineering work, but they're also trying to build high level experts in this field. So I leave it to those people to kind of fact check what they're seeing on. I do the same thing. Like I'll join a design meeting and we walk through or a code review process and you walk through and you'll see some of this stuff and you'll see code from, a 2-year engineer or a 2-month engineer and they've got like this super complex code in here. I'll pick a fragment of code out and I'll have them walk me through and explain it. And if they can't explain it, I ask why they can't explain it. Well, I figured out with ChatGPT. All right. Listen, you need to go back through, you need to document this thing out, but you need to explain and walk this process through. We kind of think that and I think this in general, right? From as a technologist growing up
Yeah.
or kind of being, one of the senior people, now in the technology space when AI is just coming around, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that new people coming into this industry understand the importance of knowing how to engineer, even though AI can, for the most part, do it for them. I think we have to be good stewards, right,
Yeah.
of this space.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's one part of it. The other part is, yeah, I mean, we're always looking for opportunities wherever we can build a process in place to take on some of the work. Like I said, we've got a process built where, we'll dump PDF resumes in looking for specific things just to pick out, hey, and this is again, like I'm typically, especially if I'm looking for up and coming engineers, what's on that resume technically is of low consideration for me, right? I need to talk to the person. So that's the most important thing for me. But I will try to figure out intangibles from that, right? What kind of roles did they do? How long were they in those roles? Did they have gaps in between those roles? And I'll kind of use those as things to kind of guide questions of when I get on to the interview. My biggest thing is I'm trying to figure out the character of the person coming into it. So we'll use AI tools on our recruiting piece, right? To try to figure out some of these things. We'll use it to help drive SOWs, figure out requirements on the low end of things. Yeah, we've got little, home built pieces kind of all over the place, little processes that we've got API driven, cloud driven processes.
Interesting. Are you using any voice recognition technology AI, or is it more
We
like on paper when you're checking out a potential hire?
We have internally, trying to think. I don't think we have any internal. We've done some for customers at this point that are pretty cool, right? Going through recordings, looking for, I don't want to talk specifics on the project, but essentially listening to recordings
Yeah,
and then knowing that these are certain things that are supposed to be said during the recording. Typically, the process before is you'd have to have somebody listen to this recording and go all the way through it. And because like sometimes it wouldn't be an exact word for word, it wasn't said word for word in this, but you would have to have somebody listen through all the way through that and then pick out these spots where they
to
think that.
see if that point was hit.
So we've totally done that with AI. We had a pretty cool project done where we built a workflow to do that. We've done it with same thing with video, right? We're going through not just the audio or not just the picture, but the combination of the two, and doing the same kind of search and identification through video. So we've had some really good projects there. You can't really see it back here. I've got off the side of my screen, I've got a little Raspberry Pi, and we've got it's tied to a webcam, and we've got a proof of concept that we're working on right now for like driving assistance, right? So you can
Oh,
stick your car, and it actually is, using vision from what it's seen, and then it actually will sit there and talk to you, right? So we've got some cool stuff that we're working on in that area too. Yeah, we're all over the place with it for sure. This is one of the cool things is, like I said, being somebody that learned how to code and be kind of a subject matter expert in a few different areas.
yeah,
How AI now seeing like some of the opportunity that AI brings to it, and it's like being a kid in a candy store. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
It's definitely an exciting time. Scary. It's where I just say, right. I think it's important we have some guardrails in place. We've got some ways that we can make sure that people are coming up the right way in this. And really, we're not getting ourselves in a position where if you take AI away someday or you make it, not cost effective, that we're not addicted, right? We're not like a drug addicted person sitting there and not being able to not go that route. We have to be able to solve for different situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so, as you're in these different sectors, you mentioned about guardrails. And so, what strategies do you employ to maintain an idea of either compliance or around regulatory issues that may be unique to some of these different sectors that you're in?
Yeah. Um, yeah, there's a few different areas. What's nice, um, one of the things that I'll always do right out of the gate, right? If we go into a place and they're like, oh yeah, hey, we've got a proof of concept going on this already. We think we can use Gemini to do something on this.
Uh huh.
Well, okay, hey, let's make sure like here's the kind of data that's going to be touching it. You have to take consideration for that. You have to take a consideration for whether the data has a requirement for reporting, if it sits in a different environment, or if it's able to be accessed by other people, and how to identify the people that have access to that different information. Is that the place where you need to park it, or do you need to go maybe an on-prem route, right, where you have more
I'm
control
sorry, what?
on-prem? Like, do you need to build this out like a local AI, right? Where you
Yeah.
can do so you have a little more control over who has access, and what the requirements to that access are.
Sure.
It's totally a case by case basis. It's interesting. Like I think back to I worked with a healthcare company several years ago, right? And it was kind of when like the Chat GPT APIs were just coming out,
Okay.
and I can remember there was like one of the first things that really caught my attention was there was a guy, and he was talking about um the potential that he saw for AI and helping his sales process, right? This was probably 2022, right?
Okay.
And I said, I don't think it's there, right? I don't think it's there yet. And he had essentially he had I'll kind of walk through this. This is interesting. But he had a HubSpot instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
If
Mm-hmm.
anybody doesn't know HubSpot, it's a CRM, right? Where you can sales and leads, contact information, whatever, right? You can have different pipelines that you follow through with it.
Yeah.
And then he had sales engineers that would work in HubSpot, and their whole thing was to sell medical supplies, right?
Okay.
They would sell medical supplies to doctors' offices. Well,
Sure.
he figured out that there was it's public knowledge, right? There's a public data set out there that's constantly updated on what doctors do what procedures. Okay. Right. So all that's information is out there. It's all scrubbed, right? All the personal identifiable information is scrubbed off of it, but all this data sitting out there, and it tells you what doctors did what procedures when, right? And his thing was, well, could you take that information, and if my salesperson is on the phone with this doctor because they're looking for a new x-ray machine or something like that, would you be able to give them real-time recommendations on things that that doctor might need based off of the type of procedures that they've recently done? And the proof of concept on that really flipped, like, this is where I guess I can clearly say my fork in the road with AI. I My buy-in came
Yeah.
when I did this proof of concept on it, and I can just remember I had the API, but same thing, ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
Where you could put in a medical code, just the code, standard code used to identify any medical procedure. And
Sure.
I put in that medical code and say, "Hey, give me a list of supplies needed to perform this procedure in JSON format," right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
put that in, and a couple seconds later, you get back a JSON packet of all the medical supplies needed,
Right.
and was able to watch it real time, have a triggered workflow from HubSpot where somebody jumps on a call, and based off of the person in the database that they're calling, this API call goes out, looks at the procedures that the person has done in the past month, and then gives you a list of all the supplies that they would have access to and the price that they would have it, to ask the doctor and see if they could upsell them. Right.
Wow.
Like, I look back at that, and prior to me jumping on that call, I said, AI is not
Yeah.
there, right?
But
And
then
then
it
I
clicked in a big
const
way.
like 2 days later, and I'm like, AI is there.
Right. Big
So, like,
pivot there.
and that was
Oh no,
3
mind
years
blown. Yeah, it's there.
3
Yeah.
years ago.
Well, yeah, I mean that amount of depth of, quick resource retrieval and then making it into actionable, in their case, potential sales just became a reality.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I've had a mind shift on, capabilities ever since then. That's been a big driver for me and where I go into thinking about, innovation in different sectors for AI. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Can you share a case when some sort of implementation has led to some unexpected challenges or setbacks, and
yeah.
maybe something that you learned like was a key takeaway?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure those kind of projects exist out there that don't have challenges or setbacks. Not the ones I've worked in
Right?
my 20 years in IT.
Yeah.
I go into a project with the expectation that I'm going to run into
It's going to
challenges.
be something. Yeah. Any standouts for you?
Yeah, I mean, you'll have regulatory issues, compliance issues could be extremely painful, right? Where you go through and you say, okay, hey, we're going to scope this out based off of this. We've got projects going right now where I've seen that in the past 6 months where we go through, we scope it all out, we're moving down the road, and then we've had our UX designers going through and mapping out designs for everybody that's going to be using it. And then you start developing based off of those designs. And a month down the road, somebody looks at it for approval, and says, "Oh, wait a minute, our branding guide though says it can't be like that. So we need all these different components to be able to put in place for it." So I mean, I say that because that exact scenario, right, in the past several months, I've
Right.
seen and come across.
Right.
That's why I kind of go back to what I was saying that, I go into it expecting that's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And the goal is you want as many eyeballs on an engagement as possible, right? That's one of my favorite things about Agile, right? Scrum specifically, or sprint demos and retros and everything else, like all the checkpoints that you have in place to get more
Sure.
eyeballs and more buy-in and more involvement throughout the project that you didn't used to have, right? The de facto way to run a project 10 years ago was to keep business as far away from it until it's done, right? As you could
Mm-hmm.
get. And
Mm-hmm.
it's not like that anymore. Even if people weren't running hardcore scrum, right? Even if people aren't doing that, the expectation is you've got closer business throughout. And I think that's really the key, right? You have as many people close to it as possible
Mm-hmm.
throughout it. You don't build an SOW that's rigid. You build an SOW that's got flexibility baked into it. And
Yeah.
you try to spot problems as soon as they occur because they're a heck of a lot easier to fix early than they are late.
Yeah.
That's that's where I'm at with that's my whole philosophy on projects is expect it pain at some point, right? We probably
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be doing this project if it was going to be really easy. If it was really easy, the customer would probably do it themselves, right? They probably
Mm.
wouldn't come to us and have us try to build this thing out. So expect it, expect something weird to happen, be able to roll with the punches when it does.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And going back to, you were talking about your growth, about how I think you said you tripled revenue over the past year or so. What's the horizon look like for you? What's your next set of goals, and what would be sort of like the next challenge that might be holding you back from getting there?
Yeah, I think I mean our expectation is we're still relatively small, right? We've got about 30 engineers. I would like to see us get in the 50 to 60 range next year. I think we've got a good spot to do that. We're getting stronger in the transportation and logistics space. I want to continue to grow in some other areas. AI is a really interesting one. If you read out there where what was the article not long ago saying 90 to 95% of AI use cases fail to make it to production, something like that.
Uh, Okay.
Ours
Interesting. I
ours
didn't hear
ours
that
is
one,
on
but yeah.
it. Like, every
Right.
every AI project that we've taken on, we're going to production with it. So we're definitely doing
Huh.
something in this
Yeah.
space, and,
That's great.
I think we're definitely carving out a spot where we've got a new strength to bring to the market with it. So this could be an interesting way where we could start seeing some additional growth moving forward.
And what does that look like? You said you're carving out a new spot.
Yeah, well, I think, if you looked 2 years ago, the percentage of our projects that had an AI focus were zero. You know what I mean? I've always said, data's our specialty, it's our sweet spot. I always keep this was one of our very early projects. I always keep this on my desk, my nice little
What is
trophy.
it?
Well, that used to be a $4 million Teradata system, right? And then we decommissioned it and we replaced it. So in the closet behind me, I've got about a half a ton of bare metal for a Hadoop cluster that we replaced it with.
Wow.
Hardware for the Hadoop cluster was 25 or 30,000. Software included, it was about 50,000 to do
Huh.
that. So, $50,000 to replace, $4 million system. But there's a
Crazy.
handful of people across the US that have one of these things sitting on their desk where we decommissioned this guy, and then we got nice little trophies to remind us of it after the fact.
Yeah.
Data's always been our sweet spot, still is, right? I've got a project tomorrow to go through a new data project. But for every data project that I'm running into these days, I've got an AI project that I'm running into, and that's where I see the market shifting. We've definitely we're starting to build up some success stories to drive some of that moving forward.
Exciting times, 100%.
Hopefully, yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. Until the Tesla robots take over, and then I don't know. Then
Right.
we're court jesters or something like that. I don't know what we do.
Well, I think that there's the full autonomous cars coming before that, and We'll see how many people get in those routinely, right?
Have you done it? Have you done the autonomous cars?
I have not. No, have you? Have you done the Waymos or anything?
They're awesome.
Yeah,
They're so cool. They're you know, our business. I'm in South Carolina, but our business was headquartered out of Phoenix, right?
right.
So I go back to Phoenix quarterly or so, and I get to meet up with our customers, get up to meet up with a lot of people out there. Um, you know, last year, maybe 2 years ago, maybe is when they kind of first started rolling out. And
Okay. They had
I
them
mean,
there
I
in
was like,
Phoenix?
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
2 years ago, like you could get in one, but they were pretty limited to where they go. And
Sure.
then last year they go a lot more places, but we didn't see a ton of them. Last time I was in Phoenix and I got out to, you know, where they have the ride shares and everything,
Yeah.
they had there was one section that always used to be cabs and Ubers, and I didn't see anything but Waymos at
Really?
that. And they're great. They're wonderful to get in.
Wow.
They used to be super conservative with the drives, and now they're a little bit more aggressive, which is kind of unsettling when you get into
Yeah.
it.
Right.
I mean, no more so than, you know, than a person driving it. In
Then
fact,
could be. Sure.
yeah, I mean, if you just pretend like there's somebody in there driving, if you didn't know, right?
Yeah.
You would think
It would feel the same.
you would think you had a safer driver. In
Yeah.
my opinion, you would
Huh.
think you had a safer
Oh, I
driver.
see. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's nice. You get full control. You get pick whatever music's going on. It'll it sits there and brake checks you at the beginning to make sure you have your seatbelt on. That's how it enforces that one. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, no, they're the real deal. It'll be interesting to see where robo taxis go with it, but I'm sold. I love them
Yeah.
when I go out there.
Yeah.
So price point, I don't know. I don't know if it's one of these things like it's like an airline where it's heavily subsidized and that's how they make the prices the same on them. But
Mm.
yeah, price point there, it's the same as getting an Uber somewhere,
Yeah.
cheaper than it for sure.
Yeah. Same price point for now anyway. Interesting.
Yeah. So they're awesome. It'll be
Yeah.
interesting to see where they, you know, when they get outside of big cities and things like that. But
Yep.
they're they're pretty cool.
Wow. And Casey, as we wind up here, what sort of suggestions might you have for someone that's hesitant about adopting AI in their business?
You said it earlier. You know, people are dipping their toes in the water. There's you
Hmm.
know, I think it was Mark Cuban a while ago had the quote that said in the future there's going to be two companies: the companies that adopt AI and the companies that those companies put out of business. Right?
Yeah.
That's going to
Okay.
go.
Yeah.
I used to think that was maybe a little too aggressive. I don't know anymore. I don't know
Mm.
how unrealistic that statement is. I saw Salesforce, right? A couple weeks ago, they put out the statement where they were reducing customer service headcount from 9,000 to 5,000, and they're crediting AI for making that possible.
Not
Boy,
surprising. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm a business, right? Like you want to do it strategically, right? But you know,
Of course.
if you've got capital available to dip your toes in something and take a crack at it, I wouldn't just call, and this is like the contractor and me should be like, oh, just call Casey, right? Give Casey a call and we'll figure it out. I'm happy to help on that one. But if I own a business and I think, should I be getting into AI? Carve out a small team or something like that where you can just do kind of like a weekly touch base and look for, hey, these are our biggest pain points in our company, right? Not to displace workers necessarily, but is there a way that we can take some of these really low value, high energy tasks
Hmm.
away from people and automate those so that we can free these high value, lower energy tasks up for those same people to work on? Is there a spot
Hmm.
to do that? And then, you know, figure out the ROI, right? Figure out what the cost of the existing process is, what an idea is for, you know, when you would want to implement something, and then what the cost is for that implementation. Figure out what your ROI is.
Yeah.
But pick
Yeah.
out something and at least do a proof of concept on it just
Test.
to see if there's something there.
Yep.
Because, you know, in my experience, if you're not doing it, one of your competitors is. So
Oh, for sure.
That's
Undoubtedly.
what
Yeah.
I'd say with it.
Yeah.
It's my advice is don't bury your head in the sand on this one.
Right. Yeah. At least swim with the school somewhat.
Something. Yeah,
Yeah.
just test it out, right? No, you
Yeah.
don't have to go all
Great
in and
advice.
replace your entire whatever department or anything like that, but
All right.
just see if there's a use case for AI to, automate and improve optimization on something. That's what
Yeah.
I would do.
Yeah, you don't have to be like the owner of Spotify right now, or no, I always say that Shopify. He said that 85% of someone's new job that they're hiring for can be done by AI. Then don't hire the person.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a
I mean
dangerous
he's
game.
on a different level, right? But yeah,
Yeah.
like
Somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the
somewhere
middle.
in the middle. Yeah. 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 Well, and then, you talk to like the plumber down the street that just installed an AI voice receptionist so that, they're able to take that many more calls and have their receptionist be with like, say like a tier of like an emergency dispatch for their plumber, and they're handling that customer much better because that
Yeah.
customer needs something now, wants that human interaction, and all those other calls that are just lower priority, can get handled by the AI. So
Yeah.
the receptionist is still there. It's just that they've got an assistant that's helping him out with the little stuff.
I'll tell you, you made me think of something, right? So, I just did a video on this last week or the week before, or something like that.
Oh yeah.
When I saw, have you heard of 11 Labs?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So 11 Labs,
I
voice
have.
to
Yeah.
text, vice versa, right? They've got all those different things. Well, I saw an article that came out and they had reached an agreement with the Burt Reynolds estate, right? To be able to use
Okay.
his voice for
Ah,
11 Lab.
fun.
And the first thing I thought, like I said, we're heavy in the transportation space, right? But the very first thing I thought of was I said, why, like I see that, and what kind of world do we live in where you don't have a trucking assistant that you can talk to as the bandit from Smokey and the Bandit, right? That was my very so, my poor wife, right? Like of course I go into full dev mode at probably like 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And by the morning, I've got this number. I tie it into Twilio, and I've got this number that you can call into, and you can say, "Hey, I'm looking for a rate going from Dallas to Atlanta on a refrigerated truck, right? Tell me a good price." And you've got the bandit talking to you, right?
That's
As
awesome.
the bandit doing it. And I can remember, like, we're sitting at the breakfast table, and I've got we're getting my kid ready for school, and I've got this thing playing, and she's looking at me, and she's like, whatever this is, it can't be legal. This can't be a good idea to do this. And I'm like, oh, it totally is. But my point is, everybody wants to talk to a real person when you
Yeah.
call into support.
Yeah.
Has always been the same, right? Everybody wants to talk to a real person. But would that be true? Like if you had the option of calling in and getting dispatch support, nothing against, I know some fantastic trucking dispatchers out there, right? They know
Yeah.
their stuff.
Yeah.
But is there not at least an argument that if you're a truck driver driving down the road and you could get the same information from an AI dispatch assistant that you could from a dispatcher, that you would not want to talk to Burt Reynolds from Smokey and the Bandit? My belief is that could be a rule to an exception to that rule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
nothing
Yeah.
else, this is like tier one, and then you can
Exactly.
wrap them up
Yeah.
to a tier two dispatcher to get something into. I don't know
Yeah.
what you're going across the country wouldn't want to talk to that though. So
Oh yeah. 100%. It'll ease the pain. It'll probably get them the information quicker
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
have a little fun with it.
yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. Fantastic. Well, Casey, this has been just a complete pleasure having you on board here. I want to say thank you very much. And yeah, any parting thoughts before we wind this up at all?
No, like I said, let's have some fun with this. It doesn't have to be, all business and or doom, right? With AI, like, there's a lot of fun to be had in here.
Oh, totally.
Don't leave it to the people that only say that they're the ones that are working on AI. The world we live in now, if you have an interest in getting into this space, you have more tools than you've ever had at your disposal to get into this. And even with Techletics, right? If you've had somebody saying that, hey, you're not an IT person or you're not a developer to get into it, that's not it. That's not the truth. If you've got an interest in getting into it and you've got good work ethic, right? You're exactly the kind of person Techletics is looking to bring into the market and build an IT career with. So it's a fun time to be doing it. And my recommendation is join in the fun.
Love it. So how can people find Techletics and you online?
Yeah, Casey Fox. You can look me up, Casey Fox, Techletics, LinkedIn, or go to techletics.com/contact. There's a feedback form there, and I get the responses along with several other people at Techletics. Either one of those ways, and it's real easy to get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Casey.